Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we are listening to Killer Cases. This is Death in Suburbia.
Something horrible has happened to me. I got the call on 1:31 in the morning. You could see the lights were on in the kitchen. You saw her legs laying on the kitchen floor.
Shot her in the back, and then shot at her twice more while she was in her final resting position.
There was also a clock in the kitchen sink. It read 11:14.
Upper Montclair in this wealthy, posh suburb, big stately homes.
This is a case that has disrupted our community, horrified our community.
This is the murder of a young, beautiful mother to a 6-year-old in the prime of her life who was very successful.
She was a member of a D9 organization, historically black fraternities and sororities.
She came into contact with an individual there by the name of Bakari Burns.
They had a few kind of long distance trysts, you might say.
The content certainly was not for the faint of heart.
And the way it happened, I wasn't able to get her out of there in time. It's just been really, really, really hard.
This is what he's going to tell you.
Situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
That's not the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, and find the defendant. Upper Montclair in this wealthy, posh suburb, big stately homes. It's very progressive, and it was one of the first integrated suburbs in New Jersey.
And this $1.7 million house on North Mountain Avenue was home to a very prominent African American couple.
James Ray was an attorney. He was a former New York City police officer. Angela Bledsoe was a beautiful woman, younger than Mr. Ray, very successful financial analyst.
I mean, when she walked into a room, she commanded attention because of her presence.
And she began working at his law office. They were trying to keep it secret that they were having an affair, but she suddenly became pregnant.
Ray was married at the time and soon sought a divorce, forcing his wife Cheryl to move out of the Montclair home.
Angela had moved into that home with their minor child. She was 3 years old.
She was an excellent mom. She loved her daughter. That was her pride and joy.
They ran with a wealthy African American crowd who summered in Martha's Vineyard and were in different organizations.
She was very active in her community, and that was just who she was.
At some point, the relationship took a turn and began to deteriorate. And she indicated in a journal that she had been trying to repair the relationship. It became apparent to her over time that the relationship just was not salvageable.
In October of 2017, Angela went for a homecoming weekend at her college, Florida A&M University in Tallahassee.
She loved her alma mater. She was well thought of on that campus.
She was a member of a D9 organization, historically black fraternities and sororities.
And she came into contact with an individual there by the name of Bakari Burns.
Burns was a successful businessman and a city council member in Orlando, Florida.
They hit it off during that homecoming.
They got together on 4 other occasions. One time they met in D.C. They had a few kind of long distance trysts, you might say.
Back at home in Montclair, James Ray began to be suspicious of Angela.
He asked their daughter what Angela's password was to her phone, and he basically saw all these text communications with Bakari Burns.
The content certainly was not for the faint of heart. Anybody looking at those text messages would understand that there was a relationship there.
And that is what sent him into a spiral.
A few mornings later, Ray woke Angela up and confronted her.
She indicated that, I think he got into my phone. He's asking me about cheating.
Angela texted her sister Lisa.
I just felt that she was in danger, and I wanted her to get out of the house.
Ray confided to a friend what he told Angela.
I'm happy that you want to move on, but you're not going to take Alana from me. That's not going to happen.
I just think his ego would not allow him to accept the fact that she was going to leave him.
And then Ray decided to confront Angela's lover, Bakari Burns.
Mr. Ray had basically told Mr. Burns, perhaps, I should come down there and handle that. And Mr. Burns took that as a threat and hung up the phone.
On the morning of October 22nd, James Ray scheduled a series of appointments.
Created his will that day, went to the bank, took funds out of the bank, had the will signed and notarized.
We know that he packed a number of suitcases for his daughter. He packed his passport.
Hello?
Now I'm on my way to pick up Alana.
We know that on his way to pick up his daughter, he made a phone call to a woman.
Protecting people, and I'm going to speak in generalities.
He indicates that sometimes you have to protect people in ways that seem unconventional or may even seem crazy.
If you ever get an opportunity to communicate with someone, please don't hesitate. Please don't. Especially, and it's no sound scary, but don't get scared. Especially if it's to Alana.
And Mr. Ray indicated he didn't tell her everything, that he wasn't telling her everything, and he wasn't telling her everything on purpose.
However, if the stars don't align correctly, for whatever reason, and life gets more puzzling and mumbo jumbo, and I'm not available, for whatever reason, maybe I decide to move to Ethiopia, for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Can you make me a promise and try to stay in touch with Alana?
Once that call was completed, he did sign his daughter out of the school. We had the sign-out sheet that indicated Mr. Ray picked her up at approximately 5:30 p.m. and made 2 additional phone calls,
including to his grown daughter, Chelsea, with his younger daughter in the car listening.
Hey, Charles, how you doing? This is Dad. Love you. Listen, I'm going to ask you a big favor. I don't know when I get to talk to you, but get to know your sister, Lana, please. All right? I thank you very much. Thank you for the present you gave me. All right. Talk to you later, Joe. Love you.
On that same day, October 22nd, Angela was putting in motion her plans to move out.
She had an appointment that day at 11:30 to look at homes in the area.
She had already looked at several houses, and I just encouraged her to just pick a house so that you can get out. The things that I was learning about him and the behavior that I was seeing from him, I did not feel that she was safe.
Angela's real estate agent sent word she had found a possible place for her in Montclair. But Angela never showed up for her appointment.
Inspector Richie. Hello, Inspector. My name is Robert. Just got word that something horrible has happened at my brother's house there in Montclair. And what happened? I am not certain, but it sounds like there might be a murder victim there. Okay, and why do you think that? I know this is probably emotional to take time.
Robert Ray had met his brother James a few hours earlier at a nearby restaurant.
James Ray asked his brother if they would agree to watch his daughter. He provided 2 suitcases for Robert, and he wanted a picture with him and his daughter, and basically gave her a kiss, excused himself, and left the restaurant. Unbeknownst to Robert at that time, secreted within one of those suitcases was money, checks, James Ray's last will and testament, and a typed letter that he had written to Robert about what had happened that day.
We met up earlier, and he came down at dinner, and hadn't heard from him since, but he had left a bunch of stuff for me, and just the letter was one of them. His daughter is here. He left his daughter with you? Yes. What did the note say? Why do you think someone got killed there? He said that he attempted to clean his guns, and he drove and went for one of the guns, and reaction he was upset her because she was where she came. I reacted in the heat of the moment, he's down, and couldn't stop firing. I got the call on 1:31 in the morning, arrived on scene at 2:42 a.m. You could see the lights were on in the kitchen, and you saw the bottom half of the victim. You saw her legs laying on the kitchen floor.
It would appear that Angela Bledsoe was sitting on the love seat at the time she received the first gunshot wound, which was to the chest. There was a trail of blood that led from where Angela was shot initially into the kitchen area.
That tells me that the shooter had the gun facing down. If someone was on the floor, it would be something in that fashion, pointing down towards the person on the floor.
I asked one of the detectives, did she suffer long? I can't imagine the fear that she went through. Nobody should die like that.
There was a firearm that was next to the decedent on the floor in a large bloodstained pool.
That was a gun that allegedly she had pulled and pointed at him. His whole defense was that Angela attempted to shoot him first, and he responded in self-defense.
Angela's cell phone was found on a kitchen stool, apparently placed there by Ray.
He had also talked about the fact that he had hoped someone would be able to get into Angela's cell phone, and it would prove that she was having an affair.
No, we talked about stuff regarding Angela's family, how, she was cheating and nobody believes him and so forth. I'm scared and don't want the long burden of a trial to prove my point. I want to see James and jury doesn't agree. There was also a clock that we found in the kitchen sink. The battery was out of it. It fell off of the wall. It read 11:14.
If that was the time of the shooting, 11:14 in the morning, it meant that all of Ray's phone calls to friends and family as he drove around Montclair took place after he shot Angela.
Life is very interesting. It turns. You really don't know what tomorrow holds in any respect.
His demeanor was not indicative of someone who just committed that kind of act, someone whose life was just placed on the line and had to then act in self-defense. He was going to go back to Montclair, lay down next to Angela, and commit suicide.
So did he, say that he was going to kill himself, or did he just speculate that he doesn't want to go through the trial and everything, or did he actually write out the words "I'm going to kill myself"? No, he didn't write those words out. That's I guess what makes it a little bit ambiguous.
James Ray saw the flashing lights of police. Because his plans to commit suicide were interrupted, he decided to let law enforcement conduct their investigation, and he would disappear for a while.
Through the night, his brother pleaded with James Ray to come back. To no avail. James Ray was in the wind.
It was just unnerving to think that this guy who had murdered this innocent woman in cold blood, no one knew where he was. He was on the loose. It was dangerous. And Bakari Burns in Florida was sweating bullets, I can tell you that. The FBI called him and said, "You need to leave your address."
And there was concern about Angela's funeral.
We had to get extra security because they didn't know if he was going to show up and try and kill us.
Police had initially tracked James Ray to the airport in Newark, New Jersey.
He drove into short-term parking. He left his vehicle there. He then paid cash for a taxi to drive him to somewhere in Philadelphia. He found an area where homeless people have occupied and tried to hide in plain sight.
He was actually using my sister's credit card and making charges on there to get to where he was going. He was very cunning, very cunning.
So James Ray found his way to a truck stop where he was able to get a truck driver to give him a ride. And he ended up going from Pennsylvania to Ohio, from Ohio to Memphis, from Memphis to Texas, and then he ended up crossing the border from Laredo, Texas into Monterrey, Mexico.
And at that point, we were alerted. He got on a plane in Mexico to fly to Cuba.
When you think of Cuba, you say to yourself, that's it. Person's probably never coming back.
But with the help of the FBI, detectives in New Jersey got Interpol to post what is known as a red notice for James Ray.
It is a international warrant that is served by Interpol.
James Ray arrived at the Havana airport after 2 weeks on the run.
He got into a preliminary entrance area, so he was in what their version of customs would be. Upon getting notice of the warrant, they held him there and gave us a limited period of time to actually get there.
We have breaking news tonight about James Ray III, that Montclair, New Jersey attorney charged with murder. In a surprise development, authorities in Cuba have turned him over to FBI agents.
If you commit a crime in the state of New Jersey, we will not forget, we will not forgive, and we will find you.
This is a case that has disrupted our community, horrified our community in many ways. And we're hoping that this arrest will somehow bring some level of closure.
And when the Cubans handed over James Ray, they also handed over all of his personal effects, including his handwritten journal.
The journal set out what he claims occurred on the day of the murder,
including what happened to the gun he used that day.
That weapon has never been recovered. In his journal, he talked about the fact that he said that he field stripped that weapon and discarded it in various garbage cans along his travels.
And Ray wrote that it was Angela who wanted him dead, not the other way around.
She was done with him. She set her sights on somebody else now. Since he would not give her permission to leave and move to Florida like she wanted to do, she had a motive to kill James Ray.
We all knew that was a bunch of lies, but he was just hoping to get away with murder.
It was hard to explain to his 6-year-old daughter.
We didn't come out and say, your dad murdered your mom. We just said, your dad did some bad things. Tears just started coming down.
And as Angela's sister and family waited some 4 years for the criminal trial to begin, they had to fight Ray in court over who would raise his daughter.
We had to battle him in the state of Maryland, Florida, and New Jersey. You have a Christian family raising your daughter, and you're just wreaking havoc. It's like whatever damage you could do, that's what he was trying to do. The damage that was done is just really unspeakable. And I don't know, it was just, for me, it was hard getting up in the morning. It was like, you're in a nightmare.
It would get worse at the criminal trial when the family learned what James Ray's lawyer would say about Angela.
Today, in a Newark courtroom, jurors were seated for the very first day of that trial of James Ray.
He had a fabulous suit on. He looked very calm and studious. He spent the entire time taking notes.
We had people always there in the courtroom supporting us. It was a drain on the entire family. And then to get to court and to be stared down by him as if we did something was appalling. And he looked at us in anger as if he could kill us as well.
At 11:30 a.m. on October 22nd, 2018, Angela Bledsoe had an appointment with her realtor to find a house, start over, and begin a new chapter for her and her 6-year-old daughter. A new chapter that did not include him. She never made it to the appointment because she was brutally gunned down by James Ray, defendant seated here before you. And while her body was bleeding out and getting cold from death, this attorney and former United States Marine was preparing for a life of obscurity in the hope of taking refuge in the non-extraditing country of Cuba. I wanted the jurors to understand the before, the during, and the after of this homicide. That Angela Bledsoe had no motive to want to harm or hurt or kill James Ray, but that James Ray had multiple motives to want to kill Angela Bledsoe. You will be convinced, beyond a reasonable doubt, that this was not a man acting in self-defense, but rather a man with murder on his mind. The state will prove that he could not bear the thought of Angela starting the next chapter of her life. A life she had a right to live. A life the state will prove it was not justified in taking. Look forward to presenting the case to you. Thank you for your attention.
We will. Brooke Barnett was the lead defense attorney for James Ray.
Never try to destroy someone else's life with a lie when yours can be destroyed with the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, nothing is more dangerous than the truth. Truth, that was a word that Angela seemed to ignore. Ladies and gentlemen, Angela Bledsoe tragically made the decision to pick up a loaded 9mm handgun and pointed it directly at James Ray. Ladies and gentlemen, as soon as she picked up that gun and pointed it at James Ray had a right to protect himself.
At one point during his lawyer's opening, Ray seemed to be crying. Angela's family also appeared to be upset.
We know she got her gunshot wounds. We know James Ray had shot her. But why? Why, ladies and gentlemen? Because the evidence will show that she picked up a gun and she pointed it at him in one of her tirades because she wanted to be with Bakari Burns.
Burns was the Florida man with whom Angela had an affair.
She was after her next culprit. Bakari Burns, ironically also a successful African-American man, but the most striking similarity, also a married man with 2 children, just like when she met James in 2008. Angela had a very big sexual appetite. She wasn't shy about it. She wasn't shy about it with James when she sunk her claws into him, and she wasn't shy about it when she tried to get Bakari Burns. To me, it was really shocking that you would play that card as a woman and, keep talking about her escapades with Bakari Burns. Ladies and gentlemen, in spite of what the state told you in opening, this is a case of self-defense. Nothing more, nothing less. I submit the state will never be able to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that James Ray had any intention of killing Angela, and they will not be able to disprove beyond a reasonable doubt that James Ray didn't have the right or the justification to defend himself when Angela Bledsoe picked up that gun in a Tiger to be with Bakari Burns. Please state your name.
Robert Ray. He's the defendant's brother. He set the tone for this investigation. There was no need for us to ask him more than once to come in and testify. He was willing to do so.
I was going to take a look at that, sir, and recognize. What is that?
That's the letter that was in the suitcase.
What, if anything, did you do upon finishing reading the letter?
And immediately I cried.
Why did you cry?
Because the letter indicated that Angela had been killed. I guess it was an emotional collision. It hadn't been that long since we had seen them. To think about what had transpired throughout the day, that this is what it all meant. It was intensely painful, intensely sad. So I cried.
The brother, your heart just broke for him. To have to testify against your brother, that's just so awful.
On cross-examination the next day, Ray's lawyers continued to put the emphasis on Angela's affair with Bakari Burns in Florida.
Do you have any idea of whether Angela wanted to go to Florida?
Based upon what I was told.
Yeah, James Ray told you that Angela wanted to go to Florida.
Right.
Okay, so the bottom line here is that she wanted to go to Florida to have an affair.
Mr. Chen, please raise your right hand.
It set the stage for the man whose passionate love affair with Angela was at the center of the case.
Please state your name for the record. Thank you.
You know Angela Bledsoe?
Yes.
He testified to the nature of the relationship that he had with Angela Bledsoe.
How many times did you see Angela Bledsoe?
4 times.
Of those 4 times that you saw Angela in 2018, how many times did you have sexual relations with her?
Twice.
It provided a motive for Mr. James Ray to want to kill Angela Bledsoe.
And Burns described the phone call he received from James Ray just days before he shot Angela.
He asked me what was the nature of our relationship, and I said that we were friends. And then he said that I can bring her down there so we can confront her. And I responded that I had nothing to confront Angela about.
And what was the demeanor of the individual that spoke to that described it?
Well, I could tell as I continued to say that, we were just friends, could tell he was getting a little agitated. He said, I can come down there and handle this to him. I said, well, you need to be careful threatening people that you don't know. And then he repeated it
I can come down there and we can handle this. And then I hung up the phone.
You denied having more of an intimate relationship with Angela during that phone call to James Ray. Why did you do that?
I was concerned for Angela's safety.
Ms. Barnett and/or Mr. Ashley, cross-examination.
Is it fair to say, Bacardi, that there was nothing about Angela's behavior around you that indicated that she was in any type of relationship? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You had no idea that she was living in Upper Montclair with a gentleman who was the father of her child. Is that correct?
Correct.
That she had been in this relationship for approximately 8 years, 7, 8 years, correct?
Yeah, I did not know that.
So Angela lied to you.
She never said that she wasn't. We never talked about it.
Well, let me ask you something, Bacardi. She told you that she had somebody at home and that the father of her child, she's been living in this house and all this. Would you have still been intimate with her?
Probably not.
So she lied to you.
I mean, we didn't talk about it.
For 9 months, she lied to you.
We didn't talk about it.
That's what you wanted to do.
Objection, Judge.
Objection sustained.
It had been 4 years since Angela's death, but the emotion was still raw for Lisa LeBeau as she looked at the man accused of murdering her sister.
I could see him looking at me. I don't intimidate very easily, so that didn't make me any difference at all. I don't care how you look. You did something horrible.
She told the jury how she learned of Angela's murder.
I stood there, but then I just dropped to my knees.
She was the one who was pleading with Angela to get out a few days before Angela was killed.
What did you say to your sister?
I said, Angie, you need to get out of there. In large caps, ASAP, I am worried about you.
What made you worried about your sister based on those text messages?
When she said that he was sitting at the foot of the bed when she woke up, a chill just came over me. A chill of fear.
What did she respond?
He told me this evening that a conversation with someone opened his eyes, that I am demonstrating signs of cheating, that he would beat up me and the guy.
They read the journal in court that Angela had kept, and her regrets at not moving to Florida.
I often feel like God shows me at times what I missed.
Thing that really kind of broke my heart, just all those regrets were hard to hear.
Did you ever advise her to act out against James Ray?
Absolutely not.
In a physical way?
No, none whatsoever.
Thank you. Ross?
Thank you, Your Honor.
And the defense focus continued on Angela's relationship with Bakari Burns.
She told me that they were friends and that they went to college.
That was a lie. They weren't just friends. They were engaged in a sexual and romantic relationship.
And they were friends.
Okay.
Friends are friends.
It's fair to say, you didn't like James, right?
Based on what my sister communicated, no, I did not.
Now, in regards to the other things that she told you, did she tell you how much she hated James? How much she despised him? How she wanted to spit in his food?
Objection, Judge. With the exception of that last one, seems facts not in evidence.
How about it?
She did say that she wanted to spit in his food.
Who couldn't stand him? She couldn't stand him, right?
I didn't like his behavior, no, absolutely not.
And she couldn't stand him, and she told you how much of disdain she had for him. She wanted to move, she wanted to leave, right?
She definitely wanted to leave because of the way she was being treated by the defendant, which I wish she had earlier, then she'd probably be here today.
James Ray and his lawyers would need to decide soon whether he should take the stand.
Mr. Ray, you have a constitutional right to testify or not to testify on your own behalf at this trial. Do you understand that right?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay.
I had hoped he would testify. I can tell you that. I would have liked to have cross-examined him.
Sir, would you advise the court of your decision?
Your Honor, at this time, I elect my constitutional right not to testify.
Closing arguments are taking place today in the murder trial of James Ray. I know based on the circumstantial evidence that she picked up that gun not once, but twice and pointed it at James Ray. We don't only deal with the tragic choice that was made by Angela on that day, but we also have an individual who's sitting in that chair who reasonably believes he had no other choice but to shoot or be shot. She wants to move. She wants to go to Florida. She wants to be with Bacardi. She wants to be with anybody but James. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, shame on Angela to think that she could just pick up and leave and go to another state with their child. Just can't do it.
Mudding up the victim is a age-old approach. Ms. Barnett is known for being very aggressive. It's all fair game.
I told you the most dangerous person is somebody that really feels that they have no choice, that they have nothing to lose, that they have no control of their life. And that was Angela. James was the only thing standing in Angela's way. Self-defense exonerates a person who uses force in the reasonable belief that such action was necessary to prevent his or her death or serious injury, even though his belief was later proven mistaken. When you go back and happen, there's only one verdict that you can come. As to count one murder, not guilty. Thank you. She was really brilliant. I mean, I'm supposed to be neutral, but I thought the jury might be convinced.
Thank you. My opening statement, I told you that after more than 6 years in a relationship with James Ray, Angela Bledsoe was moving on and she was moving out. She got out, but it was in body bag. The defense spent considerable time talking about Angela. This isn't a morality trial. It's about murder. These three shell casings, in a way, the state submits, are silent witnesses to the event that occurred that day. Each one of these goes to the defendant's state of mind. Purposeful and knowing. Purposeful and knowing. 4.45 caliber hollow point bullets fired at Angela Bledsoe. She had a hole in her heart, holes in her lung. She was bleeding out internally. She would have been dead from that injury within 2 minutes. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that when Mr. Ray fled to Cuba, those were the actions of a man who felt guilty. The state submits that we will be firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt as to the charge of knowing and purposeful murder. Thank you.
The jury was charged that morning, and they were given the case around 1:30 in the afternoon. You never know how long a jury is going to deliberate.
There's no gun. The jury can believe what the jury believes, so there's no such thing as a slam dunk.
At one point, jurors sent a question to the judge, suggesting they were considering a manslaughter verdict.
I knew they were considering it. It wouldn't carry with it as high a degree of imprisonment as if he was found guilty of first-degree murder.
And when they came out and asked the question, I sent out a text and I said, everybody, please pray. Please start praying, because that worried me. I just got on my knees and I started praying. We needed to feel good that he would be behind bars for the rest of his life. And that's why we wanted first degree.
And by 4:30 that afternoon, we had a verdict.
Members of the jury, you have indicated to the sheriff's officer that you've arrived at a verdict. Is that correct?
Angela's extended family and her college sorority sisters were among those who packed the courtroom.
Question number 1. How do you find on the charge of murder?
On the charge of murder, we find a defendant guilty of murder.
Thank you, Lord. First degree, you're guilty. We're done with this part of our life.
And guilty also on 2 firearms charges.
He was stoic. No emotion that I saw at all.
He was completely a cipher. His behavior didn't change outwardly at all.
This was an emotional case, and it was a hard-fought case. Angela's family was finally able to get the justice that they, sought for the last 5 years.
Okay, the sentencing date will be June 22nd. June 22nd.
Domestic violence is a scourge on the community. It's the sort of thing that ought to be a very lengthy sentence that'll send a message to anyone else that murder is not the answer.
She was a beautiful person who did not deserve what happened to her.
And Angela's sister Lisa struggled over what to tell the judge at the sentencing.
And the way it happened, and I guess to the guilt of I wasn't able to get her out of there in time. I know I did my best. I don't know. It's just been really, really, really hard.
A shocking update. James Ray is dead.
A corrections officer found James Ray unconscious in his cell Sunday. The guard who found him gave Ray Narcan before he was taken to the hospital. Narcan is the antidote for an opioid overdose. Ray was actually due back in court next week for sentencing. That, of course, will no longer happen.
He was a coward. He didn't want to go to jail, and he did it on Father's Day. Who does that? It was a death penalty. He gave it to himself when he killed himself. That's the way I look at it. He sentenced himself to death.
Anytime there's a murder, it's a big deal in Quincy.
Someone had stood over her and emptied the clip, continued to fire the gun until there were no more bullets left to fire.
Somebody had, shimmied up the side of the house and jumped on the roof.
That's how the person got into the house who shot and killed Becky Bleak.
She was a healthy, vibrant woman. There was fear wrapped up in this funeral because Becky's murderer was still out there.
Our detectives are working as hard and as fast as they can, but these things take time.
There's a person riding a bike in February at 1 o'clock in the morning in Quincy. That was strange.
You can't tell who this person is. You can't see this person. You don't know if this is a man or a woman.
One of the detectives said, well, I'm going to go out and find a bike, and he found it. And that person said it was bought by a white male here in Quincy. It was a John Smith Facebook account.
This is what he's going to tell you. Situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
Do you want to say anything? Read the jury and find the defendant.
Yes. It's about my daughter, June.
So she's not awake and she's not breathing?
I tried to wake her. She was, she couldn't move her hands were stiff and her knees were stiff.
Becky Bleefnick had grown up in Quincy. She was active in the community, active in her church, so she was a very well-known person in Quincy.
I would have never in a million years thought I'd be answering the phone to find out my sister was dead.
Do you know what would have caused her?
She's been going through a terrible divorce for over 2 years now. She was reaching a girl.
She was a healthy, vibrant woman. We had no obvious reason that we can come up with in our heads to make sense of Becky being dead. We didn't find out that she was shot until the next day when a newspaper article said she was riddled with bullets.
The house that Becky was killed in, it is in what, people would call the quote unquote good part of town.
Just a typical Quincy middle class home.
The front door was found open. There was no indication that the house had been gone through or like someone was searching for anything. Once we were on the second floor, the police showed me a window that had been pried open from the outside. It was clear that that was the point of entry. That's how the person got into the house who shot and killed Becky Bleefnick. We went into the bedroom where we found Becky's body. There were some shell casings on the floor and around her body, and there were some little pieces of plastic all around her body and on the floor around in that area.
Detectives came to believe the shooter had used plastic bags as a kind of makeshift silencer.
We knew that she had been shot multiple times, but at the autopsy we found out she had been shot 14 times. The evidence seemed like someone had stood over her and emptied the clip, continued to fire the gun until there were no more bullets left to fire. None of those bullets were considered a kill shot or would have led to an instantaneous death, but would have led for her to slowly bleed to death while she was laying there on the floor. We're not ashamed to say both Ms. Keck and I had a very emotional response to learning that for the first time.
Quincy police used a detective to reenact what they thought had likely happened.
Somebody had, shimmied up the side of the house and then gotten on the garage, then jumped on the roof.
They did not go in the first window, the second window, or even the third window. They went in the fourth window of the house.
And it just kind of fit together that the door had been kicked in, that she had slammed the door shut, trying to get away from whoever was chasing her. We found her phone behind the door, and the last phone call that was placed on that phone was to 91126. So she had tried to dial 911, but in her haste, because of her fear and what was going on, she hit a couple extra numbers until the phone call didn't go through. This happened around 1:11 a.m. in the morning.
Quincy, Illinois is a town of about 40,000 people, located on the banks of the Mississippi River, known to residents as the Big Muddy.
It's an old industrial town, an old factory town. It's really your typical American big, small town.
This was shocking to the community because anytime there's a murder, it's a big deal in Quincy.
I would like to update the Quincy community on the investigation into the fatal shooting of Rebecca Bleefnick. We are fortunate to live in a community where violent crime such as this is rare. When it happens, it is devastating. Nothing I say here tonight will put our community at ease. Making an arrest in this case is the only thing that can do that.
We had multiple different suspects that we considered, or at least persons of interest. There was a report of a random prowler, but when you look at the details of the crime, it did not appear that this was a random act.
We learned that she was dating an individual, and you always, in a homicide, look at any person that somebody's in a relationship with, but he was very forthcoming. He allowed police to interview him. So that's just not usually what you would expect with somebody who had committed murder. But we also learned that Becky was going through this contentious divorce. Anytime somebody's going through a divorce and they are murdered, you look at that possibility.
Becky and Tim Blithnick met when they were both students at Quincy University.
He had been a big football player at Quincy University and then ultimately had been inducted into the Hall of Fame.
He was a nice guy. He was somebody that, Becky clearly at the time loved and was interested in. And they had a lot of shared interests. Fitness was a big part of their life.
There were 3 children. The oldest was 12 at the time, 10, and the youngest at the time was 5.
Becky was one of the most devoted moms that you would ever meet. She was the type that would make homemade Halloween costumes. She was a boy mom, and she embraced that and all of the, unglamorous aspects of being a boy mom.
They were very active in their church. They were very active in their children's lives and their extracurricular activities. By all accounts, were living the American dream.
But Becky told her family at the Blithnick home, all was not what it seemed to the outside.
She knew that the marriage was in trouble. Tim appeared to be absent for a lot of the events, even when it was family get-togethers, even when it was special occasions. It was disheartening to know that things weren't working because she was very dedicated to the marriage and she wanted to make it work.
It's the Blithnick family.
Tim was the talk of Quincy, but he and his family appeared on the program without Becky.
Becky, I think that she was a little bit hurt that they had auditioned without her and didn't want her to be involved.
Honey, I love you, but said I do.
I think she just chalked it up to that's just who Tim is.
1 year later, almost to the day, Tim Blithnick filed for divorce.
She was very hurt. She was heartbroken, not so much for herself, but for her family, for her children, knowing that this process of divorce was going to be extremely difficult for the kids. As they proceeded through those first couple of months, he made her life very difficult.
But Tim had a strong alibi. His 3 sons.
They were scheduled to spend the night with their father, Tim Blithnick, the night of the murder.
She had sent a message to Tim and told Tim that she was not feeling well and had asked if he would keep the boys an extra night. He was at home with his boys, and he's never wavered from that and has always maintained that.
Taking his disciples, Jesus ascended the mountain, and where he was.
We also pray tonight for the Blithnick and Postal families as they continue to mourn Becky's loss. We pray especially for her children that they might experience God's comforting care. We pray to the Lord.
Any death of a family member is difficult, but there was fear wrapped up in this funeral because Becky's murderer was still out there.
Nobody had been arrested, but Becky's family continued to suspect that Tim must have been the killer.
We didn't have any proof yet. It was just instinct. He came to the visitation at the funeral home, stood at her casket, and then he left. He was there about 10 minutes.
Within a week of the murder, police pulled Tim Blithnick over to search his car.
We had plenty of pictures of Tim standing by his car while his car was being searched. He was cool as a cucumber, had a ball cap on and a jacket. It was a cold day. He was being very polite and very accommodating to the officers.
As is his absolute right, he told the police he did not want to talk to them. He wanted to have time to talk with his lawyer first.
Well, I told him to keep his mouth shut and hold tight until we could talk. Estranged husband is going to be suspect number one in this situation no matter what.
You had many people who were her friends who said he did it. It was very much a divided community. Nobody would just say, okay, whose side are you on? But there would be conversations you could have where pretty quickly you'd be able to tell if somebody was pro Becky or pro Tim. It was an awful situation.
Prayer is a big part of my life, and one of my prayers regularly at that time at the beginning of the investigation was that I was hoping it was not Tim Bleefnick, because those three children deserved to have a parent. They had already lost their mother.
Tim Bleefnick not only had an alibi that he was with his three boys that night, but other than a DUI 15 years earlier, he had a clean police record.
No crimes of violence, no domestic batteries or anything like that.
And the search of Bleefnick's car had turned up nothing of value to homicide detectives. And in that first week, the crime scene also offered few leads.
The forensics are all over the place. There was a shoe print that was found near the purported point of entry. That shoe print was sent off to the crime lab. Several of Tim's shoes were also taken, and that shoe was excluded as being made by Tim. A shell casing was tested for DNA and fingerprints. That Tim was not a contributor to the DNA.
And there was no murder weapon.
The thought always in Quincy when we don't find a gun is that it's thrown in the Mississippi River. That's where most of the guns go that we don't find.
The first break in the case came as detectives began to canvass the area between Tim's home and Becky's home for any surveillance camera video.
And they went to the Quincy bus barn and found, sure enough, around the time of the murder, there's a person riding a bike in February at 1 o'clock in the morning in Quincy. February in Quincy is cold, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, we're not a bike riding community at 1 o'clock in the morning. So that was strange.
Detectives believe the person on the bike was the killer.
I think he was riding a bike because if he takes his car, a neighbor might see the car leave the driveway. If he takes a bike through the backyard, nobody's going to see that.
The video is terrible. You can't tell who this person is. You can't see this person. You don't know if this is a man or a woman. You can't identify the color of the bike.
I remember one of the detectives said, well, I'm going to go out and find a bike. Like, no way. There's absolutely no way you're going to find a bike. And he found it.
A blue Schwinn abandoned on the side of the garage, a few blocks from Tim's home.
They were unable to find any sort of DNA or fingerprint or fibers or anything to connect that bike to Tim.
But detectives discovered the bike was registered to someone who said he had sold it over social media a few months earlier.
And that person said it was bought by a white male here in Quincy. It was a John Smith Facebook account.
And they soon found John Smith was a fake name.
And why do you do that unless you're doing it for a nefarious purpose?
Whoever John Smith was, he provided a description of himself. A description that detectives felt matched Tim Bleefnick.
Our detectives are working as hard and as fast as they can, but these things take time. We have only one chance to get it right, and Miss Bleefnick deserves our best, and that is exactly what we intend to give her.
By week 2 of the investigation, there was a tight focus on the pending divorce between Becky and Tim Bleefnick.
It was a very contentious divorce. It wasn't a easy divorce. It wasn't a good divorce.
As the divorce progressed, she became increasingly fearful of him.
The most contentious issue in the divorce seemed to revolve around Tim's father, Ray Bleefnick.
Several nieces came to her and said that he had done sexually inappropriate things
decades ago with them, and that they were willing to come to court.
Whether or not any of those things actually occurred or not, it was simply that Becky didn't want Ray around her children, and Tim did.
She wouldn't budge on that. Non-negotiable.
I don't think that he anticipated that she would fight as hard as she did. I believe that he felt that he was going to lose.
We were set to go to court. We had 5 days scheduled, and that the day we issued our subpoenas, I think, is the day she was murdered.
Sarah gave us a text message that Becky had sent her before she was murdered. Once we had talked to some of Becky's friends, got the text message from her sister, and then learned more about the filings and the divorce, we had enough to ask a judge for a search warrant. We found a crowbar. We also found several plastic Aldi grocery bags that we sent to the lab for testing because we found several pieces of shredded plastic around her body.
Police also seized a fitness wristband tracker called a Whoop, which connected to Bleefnick's phone.
What was significant is the times where we had a person on a bicycle on video, that armband was not connected to his phone.
My belief is he thought that he couldn't take his phone with him when he went to Becky's house because he'd seen CSI or Law and Order or TV shows that shows that a phone can be tracked. And the only time those gaps occurred was when we could show that there was a person on a bike riding towards Becky's house.
And Bleefnick's internet searches on his computer and phone were just as telling.
He was looking for things like how to make a homemade silencer, how to wash gunshot powder residue off your hands,
Quincy Police Department response time, how to pry open a door with a crowbar, multiple things that exactly matched our crime scene.
But the most important discovery was in the basement.
We found, I think it was well over 50 shell casings in his basement. We sent those to the lab, and we learned that the shell casings were a match to the shell casings that were found around Becky's body.
It was huge because even though we had not found the murder weapon, we now knew that the exact same gun that had shot Becky Bleefnick had also fired shell casings that were in Tim Bleefnick's basement.
We had the shell casings, we had the search history, we had the video from the bus barn.
And one more video from the children's school the day Becky's body was discovered. His car can be seen in the upper left part of the screen.
He arrived at the school over an hour early to pick up the kids, to pick up the boys. In fact, he called the school multiple times to say, don't let them walk home. I'm going to be there to pick them up. And why wouldn't that be typical of his normal behavior? Because he didn't want those children walking home to discover their mother dead in the bathroom.
At 8:24 this morning, Quincy Police Department detectives arrested 39-year-old Timothy W. Bleefnick of Quincy for a no-bond warrant for 2 counts of first-degree murder and home invasion for the murder of Rebecca Bleefnick. This brutal crime has had the Quincy community on edge and our residents living in fear. I hope today's announcement can begin to calm some of those concerns.
Becky's sister got word from the lead detective on the case.
He told me and I cried. And I thanked him.
A former game show contestant turned murderer? Well, that's the accusation against an Illinois man who prosecutors say killed his wife, allegedly shooting her 14 times. Tim Bleefnick appeared on an episode of Family Feud, and when asked what his biggest mistake was on his wedding night, his response was saying, I do. That answer is now back in the headlines as Bleefnick goes to trial.
My husband and I attended the entire trial. It's like looking at a ghost. It's not the same man we used to know.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
The trial was broadcast live, and jurors were asked if they could overlook all the news coverage of the case.
I had heard actually about this case because it was like the guy that was on Family Feud. They asked me if I could be fair and impartial, and I could.
Now it is time for the attorneys to give their opening statements. And Mr. Jones, would you like to make an opening statement? All right. You may proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the last minutes of Becky's life were not spent in love and compassion and tenderness. No, the last minutes of Becky's life were spent in fear, in pain, in terror as she lay on the cold gray tiles of the bathroom floor, slowly bleeding to death.
You win your case as an opening statement, and my intent in the opening statement was to give them a picture and to get an emotional response from them within the first 30 seconds.
She looked up in the eyes that she had looked into before, in the eyes that had promised her once, till death do us part. She looked into the eyes of her murderer, her husband, the defendant. And the defendant looked down at Becky, and he pointed a gun at her, and he pulled the trigger. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 14 times.
We did not know that she was shot 14 times until Josh Jones's opening statement.
And the defense may try to suggest that this crime was committed by a random prowler who somehow obtained and used a gun to kill Becky, which naturally shows in the defendant's basement.
You always try to think about what the other side would do, or I would have raised the issue of random prowler, and we tried to confront that early on so that it wouldn't gain any traction in the minds of the jurors.
But the police investigated this random prowler theory, and guess what they found out? That random prowler sits before you today. That random prowler isn't random at all. That random prowler is the defendant.
I thought it was going to be tough for the defense after I heard what the prosecution had lined up, all the evidence and everything, but then I thought, well, I'll listen to what they say. I want to be fair and everything. But I was going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
We're ready for the defendant's opening statement, and Ms. Schnock, you may be heard.
That was a good story that Mr. Jones just told you. And that's exactly what an opening statement is. It's a story. It's not evidence.
But defense lawyer Casey Schnock knew she had to deal with what evidence the prosecution was going to present, including the bike video.
And you will not hear any evidence that there's any trace of his DNA or his fingerprints on that bike. You don't know if this is a man or a woman. You don't know if they're young or they're old. You cannot tell who was on that bike, let alone with any degree of certainty say that it was Tim. They tested the crowbar. The crowbar is inconclusive, folks. They cannot say with any reasonable degree of certainty or scientific certainty that that crowbar opened that window.
But not all of the evidence from the search of Blifnick's home was as easily challenged.
The most damning forensic evidence were the shell casings that they found in Tim's basement. They matched the shell casings that were found in Becky's house.
And she made no mention of them in her opening statement.
No, it wasn't good, but it's not murder. Their divorce was winding down. It had been set for a final hearing several times before Becky's murder. There was no reason that Tim had to do this. It was winding down for both of them. So what I ask you before we get into this is listen to the evidence. Ask yourself, what does it prove? And utilize your common sense. Thank you.
We are ready to continue with the people's case in chief. And Ms. Cox, do you have a witness?
We do, Your Honor. The people would call Gerald Timmerwolke.
Timmerwolke was Becky Blifnick's divorce lawyer.
During that time that you represented Becky in that divorce, Was that an easy divorce, or how would you characterize it?
Very contested.
Were they fighting over everything?
Yes, they were fighting over mostly the children, the three boys. They were fighting over an issue concerning the defendant's father and his supervised or unsupervised visits with the grandchildren, property division, debt division, and maintenance and child support.
You said that there was also disagreements about finances. Was that something that Becky looked into herself as well?
Yes, she looked into it in great detail, and I believe it was $481,000 in discrepancies that her husband had either taken or things that he had understated.
And specifically, did you expect her to testify about finances?
Yes.
Did she ever get to do that?
No.
Did you expect her to testify about the defendant's father?
Yes.
Did she ever get to do that?
No.
Can you tell me your name?
Becky Spots.
There was no one witness that was going to get you all the way to the goal line. Every witness was important. I'm going to hand you 2 pages of the exhibit. Are those messages that were sent to you by your friend, Becky Person?
Yes.
Did she tell you, it has gotten to the point that I even hate going to work for fear he will secretly take off with the kids and I won't see them for a long time, forever?
Yes.
Did she then say to you, it is night?
Yes, she did.
Ms. Fox, after receiving those messages, did you call the police on behalf of your friend, Ms. Timmy?
No, I did not.
Could you tell us your name, please?
Gary Collins.
During the course of the ongoing divorce proceedings between Becky and Tim, did you have conversations with Becky?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me how she was.
She was distraught. You could tell she was crying enormously. She was crying really bad.
During that time while she was crying and distraught, did she say to you, if anything ever happens to me, it was Tim?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you tell her when she said that?
I told her that Tim wouldn't do it.
Did you contact anyone on her behalf?
No, ma'am.
Do you wish that you would have?
Very much so.
Thank you, Your Honor. No other questions.
Ms. Stock, you have questions?
Yes, Mr. Collins, I just have a few questions for you, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
With your response to Becky when she said, if anything happens to me, it was Tim, you told Becky that Tim wouldn't do it, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No other questions, Judge.
People would call Dr. Scott Denton.
Raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk.
The forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsy on Becky Bleefnick.
Did you take photographs that documented that procedure?
Yes.
They were incredibly gruesome and terrible.
Your Honor, this photo is conscious, shocking, and in our opinion would only garner sympathy with the jury.
But the judge allowed the photos to be entered into evidence and shown to the jury, but not publicly.
It was rough to see, especially when her family was sitting just a couple feet from me and they're crying, and it is very emotional.
Of the 14 wounds that you saw, the 9 to the chest, the 3 to her right arm, and the 2 to her left hand, would any of those wounds have been immediately fatal?
Immediately, no.
How long would it take her to bleed?
Again, none of the bullet wounds struck her heart. She did not have any gunshot wounds to the head. So conservatively and fairly, she would have been alive after these gunshot wounds at least several minutes.
And she would not have been able to move because her spinal cord was hit.
Correct.
And she would not, it would be more difficult for her to breathe because one of the bullets hit the lung.
Correct.
Would
Would it have been painful?
That'll be overruled.
Would it have been painful?
In my opinion, as a medical doctor, yes, that would have been painful. Her gunshot wounds were painful, yes.
I can't imagine how that would be to hear about your friend or your sister, your daughter, to hear that she was in pain when she died. It was understandably very traumatic for them.
The jurors were also closely watching Tim Leifnick.
He actually did start to cry a little bit. They pushed him over some Kleenexes and everything, and it felt a little fake, I thought.
Ms. Schnock, is your client going to testify?
Your Honor, I have talked with Tim about that at length. We have talked about the benefits. We have talked about the detriments. I have explained to him that ultimately it is his decision and his decision alone, as the court has, and at this point he will not be testifying.
Okay, Mr. Bleefnick, is that correct? You will not be testifying today?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Jones, are the people ready to present their closing argument?
We are.
Mr. Jones, you may be heard.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, nothing you have seen or heard over the past 7 days shows that anyone other than the defendant committed this brutal and heinous crime. Nothing you have seen or heard over the past 7 days shows that anyone else fired those 14 bullets into Becky's body. Nothing you have heard or seen over the last 7 days shows that anyone else had a motive to kill Becky. In fact, only the defendant had a motive to kill, to execute Becky. The divorce was coming up. He thought he was going to lose. He thought he wasn't going to get what he wanted, and just like Becky predicted, he literally lost his money. Only the defendant had the matching shell casings in his basement. Shell casings in the basement were fired by the exact same gun that shot and killed Becky. The same fingerprint, if you will, on the shell casings surrounding Becky's body and the shell casings in his basement. The same fingerprint. Only the defendant is to blame for executing Becky. And in this case, there can be only one verdict. One verdict that the evidence supports. One verdict that the law requires. And one verdict that justice demands. Find the defendant guilty.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Schnock, you may be heard.
Motive is not an element of the offense of murder. You have heard a lot about motive. You have heard evidence or lack of evidence about motive, but you are not going to be given an instruction about motive. It does not prove anything. It certainly doesn't prove that Tim murdered. I ask you, look at Tim. Look at Tim right now and ask yourself, what does the evidence prove? Look at Tim and ask yourself, what hasn't been proven? They did not find any DNA on any of the shell casings that you heard about. They did not find any of Tim's DNA on the bike that they think he rode to commit this crime. They swapped his car for DNA evidence. They found nothing. There is no DNA with any reasonable degree of scientific certainty that can link Tim to this crime. None. This isn't a Lifetime movie. This is real life. The state has given you a great motive, but they haven't given you any substantive evidence to back that up. I suggest to you that the only verdict in this case should be not guilty. And I request that when you go back there, you look at the evidence, you read the law, you avoid sympathy, and find Tim not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schnock.
The jury was out through the afternoon.
My biggest concern was we didn't have the typical evidence a jury likes to see. A jury likes to have a firearm. The jury likes to have video where you can definitively say it's your defendant.
The jurors even asked to re-watch the bike video.
We couldn't really say that was him, but we would like to see the surveillance video maybe one more time. We wanted to see it just a little better.
But the judge did not allow it.
It's just hard to make a decision like that. And it's just a heavy thing to have to do. It's just an emotional thing. And then we finally came around to unanimous decision.
And has the jury reached its verdict? Okay, and if you could hand that paperwork to the bailiff. Give it to the clerk.
I mean, he knew that he was going to walk out of that building or he was going to go to prison for the rest of his life.
Would the clerk read the verdicts, please?
We, the jury, find the defendant, Timothy Leafnick, guilty of first-degree murder, signed by the foreperson and 11 jurors.
Right, thank you, clerk.
He was devastated. I think the words that he has used, he felt like he was seeing his life in third person. Didn't seem real.
When you factor in the whole history of everything involved, all the court stuff, and, going through a divorce, it all just kind of came together.
My name is Sarah Riley. I'm Becky's only sister. Becky's death was gruesome, painful, and senseless. You wanted her to suffer. You probably wanted all who loved her to suffer. And if that is the case, you succeeded. It is an invisible noose, strangling our souls, manifesting in my own physical pain and emotional anguish. She knew the kids loved you, and she believed that you would put them first, no matter your feelings about her. Tragically, she was wrong. We will now pick up the pieces and show the boys that God's love and our love will one day heal their wounds, and that life can once again be beautiful. Judge Adrian, I request that Tim be sentenced to the furthest extent of the law, life in prison without parole, knowing he will face a lifetime of isolation and emptiness behind bars, is only a small solace as we try to make sense of this inconceivable world without Becky.
It is our position today, Your Honor, that life without parole should be reserved for the worst of the worst. And Tim is not the worst of the worst. He's lived his life fully, and I would respectfully request on Tim's behalf and on his family's behalf that leniency be given.
Mr. Bleefnick, before I sentence you, you have a right to make a statement to me. Is there anything you'd like to say? No, Your Honor. Mr. Bleefnick, you researched this murder. You planned this murder. You practiced this murder. You broke into her house and you shot her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times. And you did all of that while your children were upstairs at your house, lying snug in their beds. The court believes that the appropriate sentence for each of the 2 counts of first-degree murder would be natural life in prison.
Ultimately, I wanted him to know that as much as our lives are forever changed, his greatest crime was against his children. The three of them live with Grandma and Grandpa. They're doing well. It's important for people to realize, as we did not, that this type of thing happens to real people. That really nobody is safe from evil and cruelty and violence. When women reach out for help, and when they reach out and say, I'm scared, I fear for my life, I fear for my children, we need to listen to them.
There's blood all over the floor in the living room. Something was not right.
I did a walk through the apartment. This was someone that was brutally attacked. It looked grim.
Is this someone who was kidnapped? Is this someone that had some sort of mental health issue and left?
I've never seen more police effort to find a missing individual.
We had in excess of 80 law enforcement officers that did a search along with 3 cadaver dogs. They had an underwater robot style vessel that they were able to put down there with a camera.
We turned over every rock we possibly could in this investigation and weren't able to find them.
Where's my son? What happened to him? He was at home. He was in his apartment where he's supposed to be safe. I'm sorry.
I don't know that he's dead. Nobody proved that he's dead. Is it likely? Maybe. Sure. Is it proven? No.
This is what he's going to tell you.
Situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
That wasn't the first place to put a body. No, sir. The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, and find the defendant.
Council 911, what's the address for emergency? 15th Street. What apartment? 1B.
I don't know what happened, but it didn't have to happen.
So I was doing a wellness check on a good friend of mine that I was dating, and I found it weird because I haven't talked to him for 24 hours. What's his name? Rosalio Gutierrez.
You would always message me in the morning or message me good night. So I didn't get a text that night.
And I just went to his house, and his screen door is wide open. Okay, and I knocked on the door, and I saw something scattered on the outside of the outside door.
I think that's kind of when I got a very uneasy feeling. I wasn't really expecting anything, other than to find him there.
And then I just, I kept calling his name and knocking on the windows and knocking on the door.
And called in, and I didn't hear anybody in there. I didn't hear anything going on. I didn't get any answer.
You weren't able to see inside? There's blood all over the floor in the living room, and I didn't even know anywhere. I didn't go any further. Oh my God. I'm sorry. Please. Oh, I'm kind of freaking out. I'm sorry.
obviously he was hurt, something, something bad happened. I guess disbelief was a lot of it, and fear, and what do I do now? I have to stay, right? But then now I'm also like thinking the worst.
And you can't see him at all, though? I didn't go any further, no. I'm afraid. I just saw blood on the floor, and that's not normal. Something's not right.
And I just kept saying, something's different about the room. There was a carpet here, and it's not there anymore. It's gone. There was a carpet there. It's gone.
Should I go in? Do I not go in? I will try to. It's up to you, but if you don't feel safe going in, I don't suggest doing that. Okay, well, we do have an officer on the way.
So officers of the Kenosha Police Department responded to the Wood Creek apartment. It came in as a missing person.
The resident was nowhere to be seen. They hadn't heard from him in a couple days. Family, friends. I did eventually do a walk through the apartment. I saw blood everywhere. It was on the walls, spatter on the walls, almost every wall in the living room.
It was evident that there was a struggle of some sort that had occurred.
In the middle of the living room was a large pool of blood with a section of carpet. It was actually a rug that appeared to be missing. This was someone that was brutally attacked, and it looked grim.
We contacted local hospitals. We tried to do our best to determine where Rosalio could have been or may have gone to. We tried via his cell phone.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Based on talking to the family and the close friends, that definitely was unusual that his phone was off and or going directly to voicemail.
I knew in my heart and in my gut that my son wasn't responding to me. And I knew that something horrible had happened to him. That if he were able to call me, he would.
Rosalio's mother, Celia Patterson, left immediately from her home in Colorado Springs for the 16-hour drive to Kenosha, straight to her son's apartment building.
As I approached his front door, my heart shattered. I saw blood spatter on his front door, on the wall adjacent to it, some blood on the mailboxes. I sat on the stairway for a long period of time and just cried. Where's my son? What happened to him? He was at home. He was in his apartment where he's supposed to be safe. And I'm sorry.
So now the search was on for Rosalio Gutierrez and anything in his background that might offer a clue as to what happened.
I mean, it could be anything. Obviously, we look at everything from domestic to enemies to finances to, it could be a range of things.
Is this someone who was kidnapped? Is this someone that had some sort of mental health issue and, left?
He loved dancing. He enjoyed being with friends. He enjoyed the outdoors, hiking. He was a Cubs fan. As a dad, he loved his children. He was very involved with them, baseball, with Cubs, scouts, and with his daughter, with gymnastics and dance. He ventured into flipping houses, and working with contractors. And that was his passion, and he found his niche.
We had, immediately asked if there were any enemies that he may have, any people maybe through subcontracting that he owed money to or may have taken money from, and as well as just running a general criminal history that may have contributed to what had happened.
We were able to pretty quickly determine that he was exactly what he appeared to be, which was a family man, kind of working his construction job to support his family.
And then, as his mother cleaned out Rosalio's apartment, a telling discovery.
In the freezer of Mr. Gutierrez's apartment Behind some of the frozen food items, there was the wallet with the credit cards in it, and then the phone was on its side, kind of tucked back there. Kind of confirmed it for us that it was more than just, some sort of Gone Girl-esque escapade kind of a thing.
I remember them asking the routine question, is there anybody that you know? I remember just telling them that, I said, I've been having trouble with my ex.
His name was Zachariah Anderson, involved in a bitter custody dispute with Sadie, all playing out on phone calls he had recorded.
I just told you, it hurts. I'm jealous.
Something's not right here, and I need to protect myself and my kids.
And Sadie told detectives their 12-year-old daughter might know more about the missing Rosalio Gutierrez.
She immediately says to me, "Where's Dad? You need to find Dad. He knows where he is." And I said, "Why would you say that?" She said, "Mom, I know more than you think I do." Zach and I met back in 2007. We got pregnant with our daughter. We were pretty new to each other, so just decided to start the family.
Sadie Beecham and Zachariah Anderson had 3 children together over their years as a couple. Their now 12-year-old daughter and twin 5-year-old boys.
I kept trying to stay together for the kids' sake.
It was a turbulent relationship, hot and cold, when Sadie finally decided to call it quits.
It was his violent outbursts. It was his personality, this very angry, I want to say, but mean person. He wasn't nice. He just wasn't kind. He wasn't nice.
I'm trying to figure out how I really feel about things, and then you do stop, and I'm like, that's not love. That's not caring.
No, it's jealousy. It's the ugly version. It's
like, holy too much.
Yeah, it's jealousy. It's the sickening feeling of that ugly evil. And I'm sorry.
It was always just, you're out pouring around, or I shouldn't be out dating anybody, or I don't have the right to date somebody. I should be at home being a mom.
Listen. As far as knowing is concerned, I don't want the details. I want confirmation that my suspicions are accurate. Because if my suspicions are accurate and you're in a relationship with somebody else, then it better. Because I'm not going to try and compete with some other guy for your interests, Sadie. If you've moved on, you moved on.
And Zach became aware that somebody else was Rosalio Gutierrez.
I had been just kind of dabbling on Facebook dating, and that's when I met Rosalio, and then just had a good conversation, and it kind of went from there.
I've confirmed that you've taken an interest in other guys, and I've painfully enough,
I've already done.
Yep.
And I told you I was.
Yep, you're done. Great. And the guy that stole the mother of my child.
Anybody, he didn't steal anything.
Yeah, all right.
And I wasn't yours to steal. Wasn't yours to steal.
When he saw she was truly interested in this new individual, Rosalio, he immediately started doing things like buying trackers and following people around.
A large picture window makes it easy to see inside Sadie's living room.
You're not listening to me.
Evidence that you were stalking me.
I'm not stalking you.
You did. Here, in the middle of the night, I saw your car. You're lying to me. I saw you pull away. I saw the car. You were here yesterday and you were spying on me. Well, I'm no idiot. Are you going to tell me the truth now?
He was worried about his children, and he would have hoped that she could have done better for their kids. That was all he ever really said to me about the nature of Sadie and Rosalio's relationship.
On the day Rosalio was discovered missing, Kenosha police detectives brought Sadie and her daughter in for questioning.
When we initially spoke with her, she was very shaken up. She was very distraught and concerned. Her ex-boyfriend and the father of her children, Zachariah Anderson, had been tracking her and stalking her and following her to places. And she had a feeling that maybe he was involved.
It was pretty clear from about that point on that the daughter was being used to report on, was mom talking to people, was there anyone new in her life? Was there anything kind of going on?
She said that Zechariah had made her go to the window to look at what was happening, and at one point actually had her cover her face so the steam from her breath wasn't getting on the window, which would be seen from the inside.
Yeah, we were just sitting on the couch watching TV, and we were snuggled up next to each other.
She had told us that he had put a cell phone in by the air conditioning unit to try to video what was going on. He basically wanted her to see her mom with somebody else.
It's actually one of the things she said. I was his spy.
It burns. I can't unsee things. It hurts. Makes me sick. Can't undo it.
But with Rosalio still missing, there was not enough evidence to warrant a charge of murder.
We then started to look at Zachariah from a stalking aspect. So it was almost as if there were two cases or two investigations going on at once. In the state of Wisconsin, stalking is a felony. He was held in the Kenosha County Jail on the evening of the 19th.
The most important thing for us was to get him in custody and get him in custody on something we believed we could hold him on for the long term. At that point, there was a small chance that maybe Mr. Gutierrez was still alive somewhere.
I've never seen more police effort to find a missing individual.
The Anderson family had a tree farm that was located in Sheboygan County. We had in excess of, I believe, 80 law enforcement officers that did a search through that, walking side by side, along with 3 cadaver dogs.
We turned over every rock we possibly could in this investigation.
We continue to have hope that we would be able to find Mr. Gutierrez because we kept having new leads on where he could be.
One promising lead led to a state park and a small lake near a job site where Anderson had been working.
They had an underwater robot style vessel that they were able to put down there with a camera.
I always thought that he would be there or somewhere around that vicinity, but nothing has come up.
Detectives had used Anderson's phone to track where he went on the day Rosalio disappeared.
But we also knew that he didn't take his phone everywhere. Mr. Anderson had not used his phone for 2 to 3 hours prior to the disappearance and up until approximately 2.5 hours after the disappearance.
Anderson denied he was anywhere near Rosalio's apartment building on the day of the disappearance.
He initially said, he said he couldn't remember. Then he said he may have been home asleep. He may have been with his girlfriend.
But Anderson's phone was on when he went to a local Walmart. Police got the surveillance video.
There were rubber gloves that were purchased. There were bleach wipes that were purchased. There was garbage bags that were purchased.
Things that, from our perspective, were certainly consistent with a person disposing of a body.
Detectives now had more than enough probable cause for an intensive search of Anderson's home.
It was approximately a 4-acre property in the Mequon, Wisconsin area.
Ultimately, what they were able to find there was incredibly crucial.
There's this smoldering fire going on in the front yard of the house. All kinds of red flags going up with our finding there.
And inside the house, a huge amount of cash.
It was in a Wells Fargo bag. It was about $47,000 and some change, and it was all in 20s. We knew he was a drug dealer. He was pending a sentencing on a delivery of or transporting marijuana charge out of South Dakota, and he knew that he was likely headed to prison here shortly. I think he did not wish to have another man in his kid's life for however long he was going to be gone. We ended up coming up with the theory that that would have been his money to run with if he would have known that the police were looking for him.
And Anderson's computer revealed even more.
He was keeping track of Rosalio Gutierrez. He had an extensive file on Rosalio Gutierrez, including a number of pictures of Rosalio with his young children. He had texted a number of times things that I consider abusive and threatening regarding Rosalio Gutierrez. The weakness of the case was, Rosalio was a fairly large guy, and so, the question we always had was how would the defendant bring him from that apartment to the van?
There were no surveillance cameras around the apartment complex, no witnesses, and none of Anderson's DNA was found inside Rosalio's apartment.
Those were the things that I worried that a jury would at some point focus on.
But the turning point of the case came after a thorough search of Anderson's van.
I saw bleach stains on the van, inside on the carpet. The seats were removed, and there was a chunk of carpet missing.
And a tiny spot marked with evidence number A1 that appeared to be the color of blood.
One little speck, I would say it was less than a millimeter across.
There wasn't even enough for the state lab technicians to test it for both blood and for DNA.
They were able to pull it out and then make the decision to swab it for DNA, and which ultimately was obviously the right call because it gave them a very robust profile that matched Mr. Gutierrez. How did Mr. Gutierrez's blood end up in Mr. Anderson's van when we know that those two had never met?
Zachariah Anderson was charged with first-degree murder, even though there was still no body 7 months after Rosalio disappeared.
I don't know that he's dead. Nobody proved that he's dead. Is it likely? Maybe. Sure. Is it proven? No. How do we know that Rosalio didn't get hit in the head, get up, get confused, get up and try and make his way out the patio door and just disappear into the night?
I was not going to miss any court proceeding. I would like to think that I showed him that my son, although gone, he is not forgotten.
Zachariah Anderson's family was also present, including his brother, Solomon.
I asked him, what really happened? Did you do this? He said, no, I'm innocent. I said, good. He didn't commit this crime. Now, don't get me wrong. He's not a perfect human being, but he's still a good man.
Ladies and gentlemen, Judge, ladies and gentlemen of the panel, thank you. I had never done a bodiless homicide before. Those are rare in Wisconsin. How do you prove beyond a reasonable doubt to 12 people who don't know this case that someone is murdered and deceased when you don't have the body? There's been no evidence that his credit cards or his bank accounts or any other identifying pieces of that type have been used ever in the 1,018 days since. The home, you'll see the pictures, is filled with pictures of his two children, 11 and 8. He has missed their birthdays. He and his mother had a very close relationship, very close. And he has missed all of her important occasions in the last 1,018 days.
And District Attorney Michael Gravey said it was all driven by Zachariah Anderson's jealous rage over Sadie's new boyfriend.
And that he has an overwhelming need in that jealousy to be in absolute control when it comes to Sadie. Officers eventually get into the defendant's laptop. Picture after picture screenshots of Facebook photos of Rosalio Gutierrez out socializing, but also a number of pictures of him with his kids. And we're going to show those to you to let you think about whether this is obsessive sign of dangerous behavior. So you'll hear about the act itself. You'll hear from people who love and care about Rosalio Gutierrez that he is gone. And when you combine all of those pieces of evidence, then from the state's perspective, you will have enough evidence and will hold the defendant responsible. Thank you.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. The essence of this case is actually quite simple. At the end of the day, law enforcement nor the state have no idea what happened to Mr. Gutierrez's body. They don't know when exactly anything happened in Mr. Gutierrez's apartment. They have no idea where any alleged remains of Mr. Gutierrez's body is. They have none of that. There are no witnesses. They ignored the idea that it could be anyone else other than Mr. Anderson. Not only did they search his house, they also searched his family's tree farm. No body, no human remains, no murder weapon, no evidence of a crime scene cleanup. Mr. Anderson, as he sits in front of you today, is presumed innocent, and he must stay that way. Because the evidence in this case, as it will come in through this trial, will not establish that Mr. Anderson committed the alleged crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. We will ask that you return the only just verdict, and that's a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
The state will call Celia Patterson to the stand. Patterson, do you know someone by the name of Rosalio Gutierrez Jr.?
I do.
And who was Mr. Gutierrez Jr. to you?
He was my only child.
Celia Patterson was no stranger to a courtroom, having worked as a victim's advocate for district attorneys in Colorado and Wisconsin.
Never in my lifetime would I imagine that my son would have been taken and that I was a victim myself. Never.
I'm just going to show you State's Exhibit 55. Mrs. Patterson, is that one of the last pictures that your son sent you on May 16th of 2020?
Yes.
And after that conversation where that picture was sent to you, have you heard from your son ever again?
My boy doesn't do stuff. My boy is gone.
There were tears in the courtroom, but not from Zachariah Anderson.
A lot of people were critical about his facial expressions and whether or not he was empathetic. How are you empathetic about something that you didn't do? You're not going to have remorse for a crime that you didn't commit.
Could you please state your name for the record and spell it?
Sadie Beecham, SADIEBEACHAM.
Nothing really prepares you for that. It's a whole different kind of traumatizing experience. It adds another layer of trauma that you just can't imagine.
What was the status of your relationship with the defendant romantically during 2019?
It was not. We weren't doing well. It was it was a relationship on its way out.
She did a very good job, I think, in humanizing herself in terms of the relationship, but in terms of also the complex emotions and problems with when you have 3 kids with someone who's now starting to stalk you and track you. In this text message, obviously someone's being referred to as Booger. Who did the defendant mean in your understanding to be Booger? And how do you know that?
Ryan told me the night that he divulged that he was there looking in the window that he saw Rosalio pick his nose and wipe it on the couch. And so he then started to refer to him as Booger.
But on cross-examination, Sadie admitted that Rosalio had told her he might go beat up Zach.
You send Mr. Gutierrez a text that says Zachariah Anderson lives in Mequon, correct?
Yes.
You said, well, I guess if he has your info, you should have his, correct?
Yes.
And he says he can have all my info. I want him to know exactly who beat his ass up.
Correct.
Then he says there needs to be consequences for his actions. Correct?
Correct.
So if Rosalio himself said that he was going to go give him a taste of his own medicine, how do we know that he did it?
How old are you today?
14 years old.
What is your mom's name?
Sadie Beecham.
And what is your father's name?
Zachariah Anderson.
Sadie Beecham didn't want her daughter to have to testify against her father.
I was hesitant, but there are moments where you are required to have people tell the truth, and they're the only ones who know a certain truth. Back in the time period of April 24th of 2020, were you asked by anyone to spy on anyone else? During that time period, were you asked by anyone to spy on anybody else?
Yes.
Who asked you to spy on someone?
My dad.
And who did your dad ask you to spy on?
My mom.
I don't think that was easy at all for her, and it was very difficult to watch.
What do you remember happening next?
He jumps onto the porch and looks through my mom's window with a camera.
Then what happened?
And then he is looking through the window, recording with not a camera, like a phone recorder, but a handheld recorder.
Okay. Then what happened next?
And he came to the car and asked me if I would like to see it, and I said yeah.
What's the next thing that happened?
Mr. Gutierrez, I guess.
Okay.
And I saw him sitting on the couch with my mother coming out of the bathroom. And I don't think that was gonna be sorry. They were listening to music and laying there together.
And where is the defendant during that period of time?
Standing next to me.
Okay.
At one point, her father appeared to be trying to send a signal to her to be quiet.
Things came to a screeching halt when, during his daughter's testimony, prosecutors say that Anderson actually signaled to her to stop talking or close her mouth.
So this is a situation where my niece was acting out on the stand, and she was trying to talk to him, so he couldn't stop from being a dad, even in this situation.
Meantime, the defense claimed that her mother, Sadie Beecham, who was also in the gallery, may have been doing some sign language herself to tell her daughter what to say.
Were you communicating with her in any other way without your hands, either facial expressions or whatever?
There was a moment where she got a little sassy up here, and my initial mom response was to go, shh, shh, shh. So if I did that, that would have been the only thing that I can recall I did.
Okay. In the end, the judge told the Anderson's daughter she should not try to communicate with her parents during her testimony.
She was incredibly conflicted, and unfortunately, as a 14-year-old, she had to kind of meander her way through that.
And you said you saw your dad with a recording device, and that you also saw your dad put a cell phone into the air conditioning unit.
Correct.
During this time, you are still in the vehicle.
Yes.
It's dark outside.
But light enough where you can still see.
You said it was the middle of the night.
It is. That doesn't mean I have 20/20 vision, so I can see.
Oh, okay.
I think she did amazing. I'm super proud of her. I'm proud of her for just telling her truth.
Knowing what we know about Mr. Anderson, I knew that he would want to testify because he had to sit there for what amounted to about 3 solid weeks and listen to people say pretty horrible things about him.
Mr. Anderson, you are not obliged to say anything at all in this case, testify in any way. Do you have any questions about this at all?
I think all the questions I have are now sitting with at least 2 of my 3 attorneys, and I think they're pretty clear on how things are going to go.
He made it very clear in the courtroom to the judge that his attorneys had advised him not to testify, and he was going to follow their advice.
Has anybody threatened you or pressured you or forced you in any way?
In any way regarding my
Decision about testimony?
No.
Is your mind clear today?
Resilient.
Are you feeling all right?
Good as I can be.
Mr. Gradley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a highly planned, thought out, and executed crime of murder. And so I want you to think about who there is in this case who has shown a propensity, right? Who has shown day after day in the conduct that we have outlined patterns of that sort of planning, that sort of obsessive conduct. All of the things that happened and the evidence in this case could not have happened to an innocent man, right? So I think I made essentially an unluckiest man in the world kind of argument, right? Here's how unlucky you are if you're an innocent, falsely accused guy. All of the electronics in this case back up Sadie Beecham. Would you be an innocent and falsely accused man who has your daughter say all those things, including, I may just watch him or follow him to his house one time just for the fun of it? And when you put all this evidence together, you will say to yourself, it was quite a plan, but it is not a plan that in the end can succeed because it is betrayed by that speck of blood of Rosalio Gutierrez. And you will find this defendant responsible, and you will hold him responsible despite this plan that he tried everything he could to avoid responsibility. Thank you.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody knows where Rosalio Gutierrez is. Nobody knows what happened to Rosalio Gutierrez. Mr. Gradley talks about how unlucky someone would have to be with all of this stuff, all these theories as to what had happened, things that he suggests to you, and the maybes and the what ifs. It's also interesting to note that the killer would have to be the luckiest person on the planet to be able to do this crime and not leave any DNA behind at the scene. That is impossible. This is a Defense Exhibit 340. These are the photographs of Zachariah Anderson's hands right after he was arrested. These do not look like the hands of a man who just committed a violent attack on somebody else 2 days before. And I'd ask, how is it possible for a man that has a history of back problems to wrap up a large man the size of Rosalio Gutierrez into a carpet soaked with blood and somehow lift that person out? This entire case is built on possibilities and a series of what-if questions. It's an assembly of guesswork. The tragedy is that the real killer has not been caught. If in fact it's all he is. Zachariah Anderson is not guilty.
It took the jury 2 days to reach verdicts on the 4 counts against Anderson: murder, 2 counts of stalking, and 1 count of hiding a corpse.
Our greatest fear was that they didn't think we had proved that he was dead to begin with.
Members of Rosalio's family came wearing the jerseys of his favorite baseball team, the Chicago Cubs.
We did it in his memory. We couldn't use anything that had his picture. But we all wore Cubs blue or t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats.
If there's any kind of behavior that is in the least bit disruptive, without even needing to hear anything from me, that you will be removed from the court.
And deputies were keeping a close eye on Anderson, too.
They had like 40,000 volts strapped to his leg. It was a safety just in case he were to like do something or act out or go after someone, you know. And there's one of the 3 deputies in the courtroom that was holding the trigger for that.
The defendant will rise, face the jury, and hearken to its verdicts.
In re the matter, State of Wisconsin versus Zachariah Joseph Anderson, we the jury find the defendant, Zachariah Anderson, guilty of stalking Sadie Beecham as charged. Guilty of stalking Rosalio Gutierrez as charged. As to the 3rd count of the information, we the jury find the defendant Zachariah Anderson, guilty of intentional homicide for first degree as charged.
And guilty of the last charge of hiding a corpse.
All right, verdict finding the defendant guilty as to each count of the information. Yeah, you may be seated. The state against Zachariah Anderson. Ms. Beecham?
I've endured some tough losses, but no one could have prepared me for this kind of loss. Loss of dignity and self-esteem. In a relationship that was manipulative, emotionally abusive. I cannot fix the damage you've done, but I can minimize the long-term effects, and I intend to do that with love in my heart every day.
And then Anderson's daughter, whose testimony helped to convict him.
I never thought 7 years ago this was the way me, my mom, and my dad's story ended. It breaks my heart to this day knowing things will never be the same. To this day I wonder, did he ever love me? Or was I just a pawn, a toy, or his little golden retriever? You took me for granted and you will never get the same respect back. I've worked on myself for the past 3 years. It's your turn now, if you want your baby girl back.
Your Honor, the selfish and monstrous actions Mr. Anderson took Sunday, May 17, 2020, forever altered countless lives. I no longer have the hugs and kisses of my son. What did he do with my son's body?
All right, Mr. Anderson, is there anything you wish to say before sentence is pronounced?
What I can tell you is, I didn't kill anybody. What I can tell you is, I didn't stalk anybody. What I can tell you is, I didn't dispose of any corpse. I'm innocent. And if I killed somebody, whatever that situation was, I can tell you in my own heart it wouldn't be intentional. If I didn't at all, the guy I never met, I don't really know what this is. I didn't do it. I'm innocent, Judge. I'm not guilty. I'm innocent.
Thank you. What you did was frightening, horrible. And you can wag your head all you want. The jury found beyond a reasonable doubt that you did. It is the sentence of the court that your custody be committed to the Department of Corrections for confinement in the Wisconsin state prisons for the remainder of your life.
He's just an evil man. God only knows what he did with my son and where my son is right now. God and Zachariah Anderson, no.
Celia is a hero to me in many ways. I live in hope and optimism that there's somebody out there who will watch this, who will understand that Celia will be haunted by the absence of her son and the ability to give him the burial she wishes.
I go and park in front of his apartment and I sit there and I talk to him. I have my coffee and what have you. I cry or I laugh or whatever it is that I'm going to do to lose a child in such a manner and not to have his body is just the cruelest thing anyone can do as a mother of a child that I love so dearly. There were 7 gunshots. Jennifer Faith's just screaming.
A robbery that gone bad.
And he just kept going. He never could stop him.
2:30 this morning, we're seeing this guy walking around the premises.
The neighbors saw a black pickup truck leave. They did see a sticker on the back. It appeared to be a Texas Rangers sticker, the logo of the Texas Rangers baseball team.
We put together a video that showed the truck leaving the street directly after the offense and traveling in a direction approximately 3 miles towards I-35.
I just hope that at some point, maybe this person can recognize the gravity of what they've done and feel some sort of guilt enough to come forward.
This is what he's going to tell you.
Situation. And I grabbed the gun.
That's not the first place to put a body.
No, sir. The only thing they could do was kill him.
Do you want to say anything? We, the jury, and find the defendant.
Oak Cliff is a neighborhood sort of in South Dallas. Nice neighborhood, lots of young professionals, young families.
Home to Jamie and Jennifer Faith.
1, 2, 3.
A place of happy times with friends and family, like this Easter egg hunt.
I first met Jamie and Jennifer back in 2006. Seemed to have a great relationship. Jamie, as I got to know him, is a very intelligent, great sense of humor, just a genuinely caring guy.
Jennifer, she was a speech pathologist. She worked with individuals who had, brain injuries and things of that along those lines. They were a match. From the outside, it's picture perfect. Every morning they would walk their dog around that same time, about 7:30, 8 o'clock. It was a routinely, just a peaceful walk, a normal, routine walk that they were trying to do.
A neighbor's security camera recorded the sounds of what happened next.
You could hear on the audio a hey, and then the gunshots. There were 7 gunshots. And then on the audio, you hear Jennifer Faith just screaming loudly.
When I arrived, I saw Mr. Faith lying on the ground.
Jamie Faith was pronounced at the scene.
They were shot 3 times to the chest, 3 times to the head, and there was a groin shot.
There was a masked individual. He then approached Mrs. Faith, tackled her, and then a duct taped her hands. And as he was duct taping her hands, he was also trying to take property from her and attempted to take her jewelry. A robbery that gone bad.
They wanted to talk to Jennifer as soon as possible to see why this would happen.
Is there things we have to see that it included?
Yes, you will still.
He's my best friend. Such a good relationship and marriage. We travel together. We don't.
Is there anything going on in Jamie's life, in your life? Just the regular questions that you come to expect from, good policing.
I don't want you to take personal anything that I say, because I want you to do that. I gotta find out who you personally was about you all. Just go in jail. I want to find out if somebody was watching you all, if he's in your lifestyle, or what have you, because for this is a tragedy. I couldn't imagine what you're going through right now. But hopefully, you get out of the bottom of this together. Okay? My goal was to comfort Mrs. Faith. She was a victim. I heard she had just witnessed her husband getting killed. Did you see anybody outside when you walked out the door?
So I don't know that I was honestly looking.
Right, that's when you saw, I heard somebody. You heard running. You heard running.
I heard running, and then I heard a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I turned around, and I just saw this person shoot and shoot. His body was flying
So was your husband like this? Did he couldn't say anything to him?
No, I don't know. I think I was yelling no. And he did the same thing. It just seemed quiet. That's all I remember. The shots.
Several shots.
A lot of shots. 6, 5, 6, maybe, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And he just kept going, and we couldn't just stop him.
Is it your husband's facial expression?
Just like the light, the birds turned and like just dark eyes and coming toward me, and so I yelled no, and they had the time, and I started to run, and he tackled me to the ground, and then shot, ran, and he was hitting my face, and kept trying to turn me over, and he hit my side and back, and hitting, and then tried to turn me over, and he was grabbing my arms and trying to take my rings, and then all of a sudden I saw a flash of it was silver, the gun was silver.
Then I began to ask her questions about if her husband had any enemies. He had no grudge with anybody, they didn't mention anybody that you have to look out for his life or anything.
Oh gosh, no.
The only thing she could think about was approximately 18 to 20 employees that he had laid off not too long before this incident had occurred.
Jamie Faith was a senior manager at American Airlines, working out of the corporate headquarters in Dallas.
He was in IT. He oversaw things such as, I believe, the mobile app that we use, to book flights and things like that. This was in March of 2020. American had some layoffs at the time due to the pandemic. Perhaps it could be a disgruntled employee. They did go and speak to a number of people at American Airlines, and truly everyone there who worked for Jamie or with Jamie had only wonderful things to say about him.
So this is a
Detective Walden had Jennifer review the footage from a surveillance camera on the side of their house.
That's strange. And that's last night. That's early this morning.
A figure lurking in the yard next door to the Faith home, and the detective immediately called officers still on the scene.
So we're looking at the ring camera footage, and we just see all of a sudden this guy. We're going back, 2:30 this morning. We're seeing this guy walking around the premises. He has a dark colored shirt, gloves. There's a man. He put on gloves. He has some jeans on, ball cap. I'm blessed on this video. It looked like a medium person, African or Hispanic male.
And then detectives on the scene had another important lead.
The neighbors saw a black pickup truck leave. One neighbor had the foresight to video it with his cell phone. They could not read the license plate. You blew the picture up. They did see a sticker on the back. It appeared to be a Texas Rangers sticker, the logo of the Texas Rangers baseball team.
It gave us a very accurate description of the vehicle that we were looking for.
The search was on across the Dallas area for a black pickup truck with a Texas Rangers sticker. Detectives were sure it was the killer's getaway vehicle. Jennifer Faith's grown daughter, Amber, joined her as she made the call to notify Jamie's family of what happened.
Jamie and I were attacked this morning. Somebody shot Jamie and killed him. We left the house and somebody came up and shot him. And he's gone. He's dead. He's dead. I don't know what to do.
Police put out alerts for the black pickup truck seen leaving the scene, now identified as a Nissan Titan.
We put together a video that showed the truck leaving the street directly after the offense and traveling in a direction approximately 3 miles towards I-35.
She went out with the local news agency and local news reporter asking the public to help bring some answers and justice to her family.
Jennifer Faith told me about her husband, Jamie.
My partner, my best friend.
And now, she waits for closure.
I'm not supposed to be widowed at 48, you know. I just hope that at some point, maybe this person can recognize the gravity of what they've done and feel some sort of guilt enough to come forward.
At Jamie's funeral, Jennifer had the pastor read something she wrote about her husband.
I'd really like everyone to know how amazing our relationship was. We prided ourselves on being the couple that everyone hated. Because we were too perfect. And we loved that we had the relationship that everyone else wanted.
But in reviewing the interrogation video, Detective Walton thought something was off in Jennifer's description of what happened to her.
Did he get any contact from the gun at you? Or
I don't know. I never seen the gun. I mean, my eyes were open and closed. And it was...
Why Mr. Faith? Why did he die and she still lived?
And why had she initially resisted turning over her cell phone?
Why would she hesitate? This is her husband that was just murdered right in front of her. Immediately when I received her phone, I took it to our fusion unit and had them to do a full extraction. We learned that she stated that she was having a full-blown emotional affair, that the guy that she used to date in high school and college over 30 years ago, that he had found her.
And so the police, being good, the homicide detectives doing what they do, looked in her contacts and found a man named Darren Lopez that lived in Tennessee, and he started sending her emails that he was still in love with her. You know, Darren wanting to make passionate love to Jennifer and a lot of holding each other and kissing each other.
They were also having these sexting conversations and then also the emails where they're exchanging their fantasy stories.
They probably were actually having phone sex as well, and they started a months-long communication between the two of them without ever seeing each other.
We saw that him and Jennifer had hundreds of phone contacts leading up to the day before the murder.
He was making plans for her to come out to Nashville where they would have, you know, a relationship, a sexual relationship.
This was a love triangle. The only problem was that Jennifer was in a long-term relationship with her husband, Jamie.
And the man in the middle was Darren Lopez.
He had been in the United States Army, retired from the Army based on medical disability that he received while he was serving his country in Iraq. He was blown up in a roadside bomb.
Federal agents joined the investigation and conducted aerial surveillance of where Lopez lived outside Nashville.
I was notified that a black Nissan Titan truck was located on property, and it also had the T emblem on it.
A T for the University of Tennessee, not the Texas Rangers.
I felt pretty confident that we were moving in on our guy.
We dug deep into Darren's financial situation. We found credit cards that he had in his names, and one of his debit cards was used at the gas station in West Memphis, Arkansas.
Halfway between Lopez's home outside Nashville and the Faith home in Dallas.
So we actually got surveillance footage from Darren at the pilot, and he actually, in the surveillance footage, was wearing the clothing that matched the description provided by Jennifer.
And detectives were certain Lopez was the person seen in the surveillance video outside the Faith home 5 hours before the murder, even though Jennifer had said she had no idea who the man was.
Both of them, Jennifer and Darren, they had no clue that we were looking at both of them.
Police in Tennessee arrested 48-year-old Darren Lopez, this man here, on Monday, and he's now being charged with murder of a Texas man. The police say he allegedly drove from Tennessee to Dallas to shoot his ex-girlfriend's husband in October of 2020.
A search of Lopez's home also turned up a gun.
They got that gun back to Dallas and tested very quickly, and it showed to have Jamie face blood on that gun.
It had been 3 months since the murder.
There was no doubt in my mind that it was him. He had been through all types of prisoner of war training and also interrogation school, so the interrogation with him was going to go as far as he was willing to go with.
And once Lopez asked for a lawyer, the interrogation ended. Back in Dallas, Jennifer Faith was brought into police headquarters, unaware that Darren had been arrested or that she was under suspicion.
The plan was to get both of them into custody at the same time, with Darren into custody and Jennifer to the interrogation room.
Because they wanted to make sure that they had no opportunity to communicate or warn one another.
Today, my goal is I want to go through everything. So we'll probably be here for a while. I took her from the beginning, from day one. I wanted to know why, because she had a good husband. Okay. And your relationship has in all ways, he's always been faithful. What about yourself?
I've always been faithful.
But nobody that you are intimate with, where they say, hey, we're definitely going to be intimate, something planning like that, right?
No. Ostensibly, she wanted to keep being informed as a victim in the case, and Detective Walt was doing just that.
The person that you saw that attack you,
yeah.
Did it seem to be anybody that you knew?
Not a soul.
Not a soul.
Not a soul. Right? I mean, I thought about that too. It's like, was there anything familiar? There just wasn't.
Okay.
Honestly, Detective, it feels like it seemed like he was just drugged on something, high on something.
Okay. But then I asked her, what about Darren? Have you ever heard of a name? Is it Darren?
Darren Lopez. Yeah.
Yes. Who is Darren?
He's one of my best friends. We dated in high school, and he doesn't know Jamie.
And when I mentioned his name, I can tell there was a sense of shock to know, how do you know him?
Last time I saw him was August of '93.
August of '93?
Yeah. And then, since that time, he and I reconnected. This last year, he contacted me and said that, I find people on social media.
For that young girl, how often would you say you spoke with her?
Probably every day. I mean, we're at least texting.
Was there any kind of, talk, intimate talk, or anything like that?
It wasn't intimate talk. I mean, definitely Darren and I had said, oh gosh, these are rekindling old feelings.
How do you feel about him?
I don't know. I'm just so, it's too much for me to even think about right now.
That's why I want things to be honest with each other, because, this is a long drawn out investigation, okay? The only way that I know that we will always maintain on the same page is if we're completely honest with each other.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have nothing to hide. I've always treated you kind of right.
Yeah.
Jennifer, if I were to tell you as far as like I know that there's more to you and Darren's relationship, what would you say about that?
I don't know what more you're talking about.
I feel like there are a lot of things that you're leaving out. And me personally, in my heart, I believe that you knew what happened that day.
Is there
so
anything that's leading you there?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So you said you just friends. On October 5th, you guys had over 667 times that you guys called each other texting. It's a lot.
667 in one day?
Yes. You guys had communicated over 24,000 times and 13,644 times for text messages. That's a lot of times for somebody who just been friends. And let me tell you.
Well, and I said that he's one of my best friends and I'm helping him with his kids and stuff right now.
Not only that, Darren has a Nissan Titan pickup truck.
Is it the same color?
Same black, same everything. Just like the witnesses took the photos of, same everything. So you got to think on how I'm feeling. I'm feeling right now.
I didn't know that was his
truck. Think about this, John. You got to think on how I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling like you tried to play me.
I'm not.
But the same guy that killed your husband, Jennifer, is the same guy that you communicate with every day. You have over 24,000 text messages and calls. 24,000.
I'm at work. He's retired. We talk throughout the day.
Jennifer, besides the point, this guy killed your husband.
How do you know that?
Because I have proof. And guess what? Darren right now is currently in jail, locked up for murder right now.
Oh my God.
But I'm gonna tell you like this, Jennifer. I know that Darren committed this awful. I know that Darren killed your husband. He told you we have a 5-year plan.
It was at the very beginning when he was expressing that he still had loved me, all of that stuff, and we were like caught up in old emotions, but I put the brakes on it.
But you didn't put the brakes on it. You still talking to this guy. How could you talk to somebody that you know that killed your husband?
I didn't know he killed my husband. I still don't know that he killed my husband. I wouldn't do that. Why would I do that?
And that's the question I have for you. That was when she wanted an attorney.
Do I need a lawyer at this point?
It's no problem. Whatever you decide.
I'm leaving.
How long was it?
No, I'm leaving.
There was no confession and still not enough evidence to charge Jennifer with a crime, so detectives had no choice but to let her leave. Within months of his arrest, Darren Lopez made the decision to confess to murder.
Mr. Lopez, why do you want to talk to us?
Well, sir, to get my side of the story out.
And the story he told detectives, prosecutors, and now to killer cases was that he was justified to kill, to protect Jennifer from her husband, Jamie.
I truly believed what I did was to save Jennifer Faith. That's the only reason I did it. There was no personal gain for myself in anything. I strictly did it to save her life.
Lopez says he was led to believe by a series of emails and graphic photos that Jennifer was being physically and sexually abused by her husband.
Well, the emails were from Jamie Faith saying he would describe what he was doing to her. Basically having anywhere from 4 to 8 men sexually abused her. They had her tied up. That Friday was going to be the day that he harmed her severely.
You believe that?
Yes, I did.
Lopez says his experiences in Iraq, where fellow soldiers were killed, led him to take action.
I had made a promise to myself that if I was ever in a situation where somebody I loved and cared for needed me to act, I would act. And so I truly believed on that Friday that Jennifer was going to be severely hurt or killed.
You saw this as a mission?
Yes, to save her, to rescue her.
Only after the murder, Lopez says, did he learn from prosecutors that the photos and the emails from her husband were actually being sent by Jennifer.
There was 2 fake email accounts being utilized that were created by Jennifer.
It was all fake. There is no evidence, no indication that anything like that had ever happened, that Jamie Faith had ever done anything like that.
The injury photos were real photos, were her injured, but not from the incident, but from car accident. Once I find out that everything was a lie, that Jamie was not this monster, I was devastated. I took an innocent life, and I put my faith and trust in somebody that I loved and I thought loved me. Turns out that she used all of my good qualities to her own gain.
You pulled the trigger.
I pulled the trigger believing I was saving her. Jennifer had told me about the house next door being abandoned. I knew that they always walked the dog first thing in the morning. And so, basically I could set up an ambush for him as he came out. I ended up shooting him. First one was in the chest. So he started to fall backwards. I ended up shooting him in his chest. That hit his heart. And then again, another one went through his liver. I took a shot across his groin. Just for me to know, that I was paying him back for what he had done to Jennifer all the time. And then so he collapsed down. I didn't want him to suffer. And so I advanced into the ambush site, and then I placed 3 rounds in his head. So it was done quickly, so he wasn't suffering at all. The look on his face as I was pulling the trigger is what goes through my mind. And that haunts me every single day.
Did Jennifer know what you were going to do?
That I was going to shoot Jamie? Yes.
So now detectives knew that Jennifer Faith's tears were just an act, that the grieving widow was complicit in the murder of her husband.
Turning the person that I saved, that I loved so much, that I did this for, I ended up turning against her. I mean, I'm not going to protect her. I was going to testify against her.
Confronted with the evidence from Darren, Jennifer Faith agreed to plead guilty to a federal charge of murder for hire and was sentenced to life in prison. Darren Lopez would tell the same story to a Texas jury, hoping they would buy his version of what had happened, that he had been tricked into the murder of an innocent man.
Happening today, the trial for a man accused of murder for hire set to begin in Dallas.
Yes, Mark, and one half of this murder for hire plot is already serving life in prison. Now the accused shooter is on trial and could face the same fate.
Darren Lopez had turned down a plea deal.
I went to trial. I was offered like 40 years. We thought that was a little high. In Texas, though, they had the defense of a third person. If I truly believed that the action I took was saving another person, I'm justified in that.
Thank you all very much. You may be seated. The court will recognize the Honorable Randy Mitchell on behalf of the state. You may proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Darren Lopez met Jennifer Faith over 30 years ago. They went to high school together in Tucson, Arizona. They dated, they fell in love, but as life happens, their lives moved on separately. Around January of 2020, Darren starts looking for his long-lost love, and he finally connects with her via the internet. These texts, emails get increasingly sexual in nature, and increasingly violent in nature, and increasingly graphic in nature. They are playing out fantasies. They are playing out sexual fantasies back and forth with each other. And part of the sexual fantasy, Jennifer Faith does indeed create 2 fake email accounts.
And prosecutor Brandy Mitchell told the jury to reject the idea that the fake emails sent to Lopez were the reason he killed Jamie Faith.
You're going to see the abuse and the sexual nature that is alleged in these emails. Ladies and gentlemen, the abuse was the fantasy. They were role-playing. They were enjoying it. It was all part of the fantasy. The violent, graphic nature of this was part of it. And it is that violent part that led Darren Lopez to drive from Tennessee to Texas through the night, ambush, and kill Jamie Faith. Without any reason, without any explanation, without any basis, except to be with Jennifer Faith. Ladies and gentlemen, there is but one victim in this case, and his name is James Faith.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. The court recognizes Honorable Juan Sanchez. You may proceed to have your hearing.
Please, the court. Absolutely. You're about to hear one of the most heart-wrenching, tragic cases anybody's ever heard in this courthouse. You're going to hear about, yes, Jamie Faith on one side. You're going to hear about Darren Lopez on the other side. And in the middle, you have Jennifer Faith. And it's going to be important for you all to know what she did in order to manipulate, deceive, and lie to Darren Lopez, to lie to her family, to lie to law enforcement. And we're going to ask you to find Darren not guilty. Because at the time that he acted, he had a true belief in his mind. He was an apparent thief when he acted upon it. Because the real guilty person is Jennifer Faith. She's the real guilty person here.
The biggest development this morning is the defense has told the judge that they plan to have Darren Lopez testify.
From 2018 to 2020, were you being treated for traumatic brain injury?
Yes, sir, and PTSD.
How bad was it?
Sir, I was blown up twice by 2 truck bombs within 30 seconds of each other.
Lopez was confident he could get the jury to understand why, given his experiences in Iraq, he headed to Dallas to save Jennifer from her husband.
And what's going through your head the whole time?
Starting to transition back into my military mindset, that I was on a rescue to save Jennifer and Amber from this horrible man.
Did she make you promise or give you a word that you wouldn't call the police?
Yes, sir. She made me swear that I would not call the police and that I would never tell Amber.
So with her telling you this and you receiving these text messages from who you thought was Jamie, did you feel she was in danger that day?
Yes, mortal danger. I feel all these emotions coming on, all the emotions of everybody that I've lost, starting with my team sergeant's kids, Ethan.
At this point, Your Honor.
Sure. My best friend, Dawn, committed suicide. I couldn't stop it. I was thinking about these things. Stuff that I couldn't do, I couldn't stop. I had promised myself if I was ever in a position to help somebody that I cared for and loved, I would do it. We have a saying in the military. It's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
But eventually, you were presented with evidence that the emails were fake and that you were in fact not talking to James, right?
Yes, sir. I was devastated. They took an innocent life. Jennifer turned me into the monster. I hid it. I destroyed Amber's family. Your dad is dead. Your mom's in prison. Nothing. She's on her own. I pray for her every day.
I've had the
So you're the victim here, Mr. Lopez, is that what you're saying?
No, man. I was deep in there, part of it, but I'm not going to say I'm just a total victim. No, man. That would be disrespectful to Mr. Faith.
This man, Jamie Faith, is who you killed, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
While he was wearing basketball shorts and walking his dog at 7:30 in the morning, this man was a threat to you?
Not to me. He was a threat to Jennifer.
But this man started gang raping his wife.
Yes.
And you believe that? Did it make sense to you? Did you ask any questions as to why a man who is in IT for American Airlines would email you about gang raping his wife with his buddy Jeremy?
No.
That didn't occur to you?
No.
Okay.
It comes down to I put my faith in Jennifer.
You asked no questions.
Oh.
You did no intel.
I asked Jennifer all these questions.
You did nothing else. And you continued your relationship all the way up until your arrest, correct?
Yes.
Because you wanted to be with Jennifer Faith.
Yes.
That was the whole goal. From day one until the day of your arrest, it was you and Jennifer Faith in this together, correct?
No. I would not say from day one.
Okay. So she doesn't want you to call the police, but she wants you to kill her husband.
Yes.
Ask the witness, Your Honor.
I look at the question, too.
Ladies and gentlemen, the idea that Darren Lopez was justified in killing, in executing Jamie Faith, it is as absurd and unbelievable as those fake emails. This was premeditated. 100% premeditated. And it was so that he could have her. It wasn't to protect her. It was to get Jamie Faith out of his way. The defendant talked a lot about honor. There was no honor in this. This was the most dishonorable thing that a man can do. The execution of an innocent person for personal gain. And he is guilty of murder. Thank you.
Good morning. Jennifer's not sitting in this courtroom. She's not on trial, but her acts are intertwined so much that she is on trial in what she did. Because what we know about Jennifer today, she's not a good person. She's manipulative. She's deceitful. She lies to everyone. He was so committed to her and in love with her, he was going to do whatever she asked, including protect her. Darren may pull the trigger, but she pulled down. But for Jennifer, this would have never happened. I think you have all the evidence in front of you to tell you that deep in your heart and deep in your gut, for you to make the proper decision in this case. And I thank you for your attention.
Sheriff, y'all may be seated.
We didn't know what to expect from the jury, and there has been this narrative out there in the public about Darren Lopez being manipulated, and that he was also a victim in this. The fear is always that one person will
believe the defense's argument and not waver.
Members of the jury, it is my understanding that you all have reached a verdict and that verdict will be signed by the presiding jury. Is that right?
I figured I might serve some time. But, Jennifer and Amber would be safe, and then, in a few years I'd be out.
The jury was out for only about an hour.
Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Duke, and Mr. Lopez, if you would please rise for the reading. Verdict form reads as follows. We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant, Darren Lopez, guilty of murder as charged in the indictment.
Murder is a first-degree felony, so the punishment range is anywhere from 5 years up to 99 years or life in prison with the possibility of parole.
And in Texas, the jury decides the punishment.
He was devastated.
Darren Lopez's daughter pleaded for mercy, saying her father was deeply remorseful.
Any comment about
He
Danny's daughter?
he did. Sorry. He basically said that he took the equivalent of him for me away from Amber.
Members of the jury, it is my understanding that you all have reached a unanimous verdict. Please stand for the reading of the verdict. We, the jury, having previously found the defendant, Darren Lopez, guilty of murder as charged in the indictment, unanimously assess the punishment of the defendant at confinement in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for a term of 62 years and a fine of $10,000.
I was shocked. 62 years was not anywhere in a realm of thinking. I pulled the trigger believing I was saving her. So I understand I hold accountability, but 62 years worth? I'm not a criminal. I'm a soldier. I'm not going to hurt anybody else.
Release your prisoner now. Good luck to you, sir.
Jamie Faith wouldn't be dead if Jennifer Faith hadn't found in Darren Lopez a willing and ready participant in this charade. He drove halfway across the country and then camped out next door and lying in wait until, innocent Jamie Faith walks out to take his dog on, their regular morning walk. I do believe we got justice for Jamie Faith.
Get inside. We gotta bust the window out. Now! Oh my god. Oh my god. Count 3, guys. Radio, free occupant.
Even though nobody really wanted this to be a terrible, horrible, purposeful homicide, it was. That's exactly what it was.
That's the worst I've ever seen. Who drives into a building at 100 miles an hour on purpose?